Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield talking to some of the country's biggest stars and some of my favourite people. And we've got one for you today. Iain Dale's going up to Edinburgh this August at 4 o'clock to do his chat show from the 31st of July. He'll be talking to people like Johnny Mercer MP and Fee Glover and a whole list of stars, Jackie Smith, people like that. And I'm delighted to say he joins us on the phone now. How are you doing?
Not too bad, but I should tell you, we're doing a show at 6 o'clock as well as 4 o'clock now because it's proved so popular.
Well, this is a problem. Does this mean you get double fee, or does it mean they get two shows out of you?
Well, I'm not quite sure how that works, to be honest. But, I'm now doing 24 shows, not 12, but two on each day. And I think somebody had cancelled one of the venues, and because our tickets were selling so well, they just said, well, would you like to do an extra one? So I spent the last week trying to attract a load more celebrities in politics and the media to come up. So that was all announced in the last couple of days.
You're no shrinking violet, so I presume having an audience in front of you will make absolutely no difference.
Well, I used to do a theatre show called A Night with Anne Widdecombe. Insert your own joke here. And I remember that the first time I did any questions with Jonathan Dimbleby, I was as nervous as a kitten. And he introduced me by saying, Iain hosts a theatre show called A Night with Anne Widdecombe. And he turned to me and he said, Iain, is that a whole night? And the audience started laughing. So I said, well, as you know, Jonathan, a gentleman never tells. And that just dispelled all my nerves in that. He was a very good host in that way. But no, I'm used to appearing in front of an audience. We did these shows all around regional theatres around the country, and it was a simple format. I would interview her for 45 minutes, an hour, and then people would ask questions. And I mean, this was all going back, I think we started in about 2002. We did about 100 of them over the course of 7 or 8 years. And this will be a kind of similar format. Obviously, at the Edinburgh Festival, you can only do an hour, so it'll be predominantly me interviewing, and we'll probably do a few questions from the audience at the end.
The problem with you is, of course, you're all talk. Will this show end up on the radio, or is it just for Edinburgh exclusively?
I kind of do hour-long interviews on the radio. Nowadays, you don't really get many long-form interviews, either on television or radio, which I think is a massive shame, because you get so much more out of people if they know that they've got a bit of time to explain themselves. If you do an interview with a politician that lasts 4 or 5 minutes, you know that politician is just going to come out with soundbite after soundbite, and they're going to say what they want to say, almost regardless of what you ask them. Well, once you get over 10 or 15 minutes, they run out of soundbites, and then they have to think on their feet and say something maybe a bit more controversial, a bit more personal. Yeah. So the whole idea of this is to provide people with an opportunity to come to hear people live, and it's not all politicians, by the way. We've got quite a mix of people, and we know from events that the Spectator run in London, Intelligence Square, that there's a huge appetite for public debate at the moment, not just on Brexit, but on all sorts of different things. And the reason for doing this is partly to cater for that. At Edinburgh, I've been to the festival a few times, and I go and see Matt Ford interviewing, I think the last one I saw was Tim Lawton, the Conservative MP, and he'd sold that out. And I thought, well, if you can sell out for a relatively unknown Tory MP, there's probably quite an opportunity there if you get some bigger names to really make a bit of a splash. So I've kind of gone in all guns blazing with these 24 days, and some relatively well-known people. Most of them are very well-known anyway. And so far, I think we've sold about a quarter of the tickets for the 4 o'clock run, which I'm told is really good for Edinburgh, that normally you don't sell many tickets until you're well into July. So hopefully we've already got one sold out. Nicola Sturgeon's already sold out, so we'll see.
I love what you do. I mean, you've got Christian Amanpour coming on as well, and that's interesting. An interviewer interviewing an interview is always fun. There's a turning point, isn't there, in your career when you do what you do so well, people don't want to talk to you anymore. And it's very interesting, isn't it? Because you're going to ask difficult questions, and you're entitled to, and so you should. But in this PR world, I wonder eventually whether people will just go, nah, we won't talk to him. We'll go and speak to Rylan on Radio 2 instead.
I think that is true. I mean, you look at the Tory leadership contest at the moment, where Boris Johnson is really not doing any interviews. I've done hour-long interviews with 9 of the 10 candidates, and he's the only one that so far hasn't agreed. Now, if I was his spin doctor, I would probably also not agree, because he's got very little to gain from doing it and possibly everything to lose.
Yes.
So you have to understand it from their point of view.
Yeah.
But the great thing about this, though, is when I went to see James Seabright, the promoter, and I was a bit, I didn't think necessarily he would get what I wanted to do, but he absolutely did. And I came up with a list of about 80 people that I thought I'd got a reasonable chance of getting. I mean, people I've just come across over the years who I thought would be quite interesting. And he was really taken with this list. And the great thing is I've had only 2 people say, I really don't want to do it because it's not the sort of thing that I like doing. Everybody else has either said yes or said, well, I can't because I'm on holiday, or they've come up with some reasonable excuse, but they say, well, ask me again next year because it's the sort of thing I'd love to do. And it is different. I think when you're appearing in front of an audience, and literary festivals do this a lot, it's a different atmosphere to a radio studio. It's much more intimate. You've got the immediate reaction of the audience, which you don't have necessarily on the radio. And it will be. It's not. I'm not intending to do a Paxman on any of these people. It will be an in conversation format. But yeah, I'm going to ask the questions that I think the audience would want answered.
Your success at LBC is incredible. As Talk Radio proved daily, it's hard to find an audience and find your niche and get people to switch across, yet you continue to grow and grow and grow. You were really at the beginning of all that. It must be exciting to be there, to know that when you go on air, there are so many people listening.
We went national in 2014, and that's had a huge impact. When I started on LBC in 2010, we were in a sort of almost broom cupboard of a studio. We now have this sort of space age studio and it does make you a better presenter because you feel special in a way. You feel as if you're in complete control. It's somebody, Ed Miliband, when he came in, when we first had this studio, he said, you look like Davros on Doctor Who, which obviously only some of your listeners of a certain generation will relate to. But you've got all of these screens and buttons. It's like a sort of aeroplane cockpit in a way. And it really has an impact on, I think, the quality of the output. And when I started, our audience was about 950,000. It's now 2.25 million. And it's not just because we went national, although that obviously played a role in it. You look at the lineup of presenters that we have, you look at the kind of guests that we can now attract onto LBC, and the fact that we don't shy away from difficult debates. We're all encouraged to be opinionated, and we challenge our audience. And I ask my audience to challenge me. I don't want a succession of phone calls from people who agree with me. How boring is that? I want people to challenge what I'm saying, and often they do. And by the end of the hour, I have shifted my opinion sometimes. And it's a tremendous privilege to be able to do that. And it's really sharpened up my powers of argument, I think, because if you've got a weakness in your argument, somebody out there is going to spot it.
And especially on a radio station like yours, there's too many smart people listening, including often the people you're talking about. They're going to catch you in a lie if you're trying to be a smart ass, aren't they?
Yeah, they absolutely are. And we do have a lot of politicians that listen, and sometimes you get them ringing in just as ordinary punters. I mean, Nicholas Soames, for example, somebody who you might not think was a natural LBC listener. He listens all the time, whether it's James O'Brien or me, and he does ring in spontaneously. And the other thing that's changed is we get a lot of phone calls now from all over the world. Last night I had one from the Gold Coast in Australia. I remember on the European election night or the local election night, we had 3 calls in succession from Australia. And I always get a kick out of somebody ringing in from abroad. There's something special about that.
And they've also got the pacing of the station perfect, because you go from Steve to Ferrari, which is an incongruous set of DJs who you wouldn't think would work together, but it does. It's a bit like radio too. If you make everyone different, somehow it's refreshing every single time you switch on a show. That's important. I think the days of people wanting everybody with the same opinion, all sounding the same, has gone, hasn't it?
It really has. And I mean, Steve Allen, I just think is the most brilliant broadcaster. There is no one on UK radio who does what he does. Yeah. And he's been there, well, I can't remember how long he's been there, about 40 years or something. And he dominates that early morning, that early breakfast time slot. He outdoes Radio 4, which is an incredible achievement. So he's got a fantastic audience to hand on then to Nick Ferrari. And Nick Ferrari's figures have just gone through the roof over the last few years. He's now, I think, on about 1.3 million, which, and he's been there, when did he start? I mean, he must have been on doing breakfast for 13, 14, 15 years, which is an incredible, I mean, you know what it's like, it's an incredible achievement to do that. I know I wouldn't be able, I mean, I've never really wanted to do a breakfast show, but I know if I did, I'd probably last a couple of years because, I mean, that is a grueling slot.
Yeah, I've never seen a slim breakfast show presenter yet. When you're eating 7 meals a day to stay awake, it's not easy, is it?
Right.
What's it like when you go on air and have an opinion that seemingly the rest of the world disagrees with, and you've got a full switchboard of people arguing with you, because that's inevitably going to happen? You've got to keep your cool and confidence, haven't you?
Yeah, but you've also got to be open to persuasion. I had this actually last night. We did a phone-in on the retiring Chief Constable of Durham Police. Said that he thinks we should stop thinking about punishing people. We should start thinking about how we prevent them reoffending. And that was a bit of a light bulb moment. In that I've always been a bit of a liberal on criminal justice issues, where I just think send people to prison who are a danger to society, but find other ways of punishing them for everyone else. And our reoffending rates in this country are just way above what they ought to be. About 60% of people who come out of prison go on to reoffend, and there's a reason for that. It's because they're just left to their own devices, given no support at all, and we just think about how best to punish people. And yes, of course, you have to punish people who've committed serious offences. And so I naturally thought that I was going to be assailed from people saying, oh, you're just a sort of wet lettuce liberal on this, we should lock them up, throw away the key, make prisons really sort of stark and stern places. But actually it was a much more nuanced debate, and what I found is that as a presenter, if you set out the parameters of the debate at the beginning in the right way, you're not just going to get the hang and flog and brigade phoning in. You will, I mean, I had three ex-prisoners phone in yesterday, telling me sort of their views on this. You do the same on debates on Israel and the Middle East, where you've got sort of the two extremes tend to phone in, and you end the hour thinking, well, what was the point of that? But if you set the parameters at the beginning and say that we are going to have a reasoned debate on this, I don't want people just ranting and raving. Generally, the audience will respond to what you're saying. It doesn't always work, but most of the time it does.
But you see, you have intelligence. I used to do phone-ins like, should women be banned from the third lane of the motorway? Because it's easy to argue those sort of things, you see. That's what it is, Iain. Congratulations on all your success. We're going to talk up in Edinburgh too, because I'm going to come up and see you that first week from the 31st of July at 4 and 6. And will you do the radio show as well, or are you just going to focus on Edinburgh for that 12 days?
Well, I did think about that, but no, I'm not, because I haven't done this before, and although people say, well, it's only sort of an hour each, I mean, surely you can do your radio show as well. Well, now I'm doing the 6 p.m. slot, I couldn't anyway, and we don't have studios in Edinburgh, and I did look into whether we could sort of hire a studio, but in the end I thought, no, if you're going to do this, do it properly, just take 2 weeks holiday. I mean, this is effectively my summer holiday.
Good luck with that.
Weeks off. Yeah, quite. Take 2 weeks off and devote yourself to this entirely. And the fact that we're now doing these 24 shows, and can I just plug some of the guests on the 6 o'clock run?
Please.
We've got Len McCluskey, the head of Unite, the union, Neil and Christine Hamilton. They did their own Edinburgh show.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Sold out every time. Yasmin Alabar-Brown and Kate Adie. That should be quite a good one.
Wow.
Christopher Biggins, can you believe? Neg Soames, Paul Gambaccini, David Starkey, Anne Diamond and Nick Owen reunited at last.
Wow.
So it's a fairly varied mix. It's not all sort of serious politics.
Talk to me about Brexit and whether we're sick of talking about it. I wonder whether the general public have had enough. Have you had to be aware of that on your show, that you can't bang out 3 hours of Brexit 5 days a week?
Yeah, I am. There was a point when all of the Theresa May meaningful votes were happening where I think 1 week we literally did 3 hours every day, but there was an appetite for it. The phones were ringing off the hook, and you can't judge everything by the quantity of calls you're getting, but if you've got full switchboards from the moment you go on air on a particular subject, you kind of think, well, people aren't as bored with this as we keep being told in the media. And it was all newsy. There were things happening. I think if you just think, well, I have to do a Brexit phone-in every day just because that is the big issue, I think that's the wrong way to approach it. And at the moment, I'm tending to only do a Brexit phone-in if there is really something new to talk about. And frankly, at the moment, there isn't really, because it's all gone in abeyance while the Tories rip themselves to pieces over who's going to be their next leader. And there was a point where I was so relieved not to do a Brexit phone-in that I made a point of telling the audience that, because I think, because I'm a political animal, they all think that I'm obsessed by it. And I have the same frustrations as anyone else with the whole process. So to go and do something completely different for a whole programme and not even mention Brexit hardly at all was quite refreshing.
And can anyone stop Boris? I know you've taken the stand that if he's not on, nobody's coming on to represent him, and I think that's smart because he's had his opportunity. Is there anybody who's in a position to challenge him at this point? It seems like the nearest person to him is still 700 miles away down the M1.
I think we'll see later on today with the result of the second ballot, but I think he's going to be even further ahead. You've got all sorts of people now coming out supporting him who are not, shall we say, his natural supporters. Andrea Leadsom declared for him this morning, and Matt Hancock as well, who you wouldn't think would be a natural supporter. Part of it is because they all want jobs in a Boris Johnson government. So I think he will definitely be in the final two. Who the second one will be, I think it's still reasonably open. I think it's probably going to be Jeremy Hunt, but Rory Stewart is making a lot of noise. I think we will know by the end of today whether he really has picked up the kind of levels of support he would need to make it to the final two. I suspect not. But the main thing is they do actually there can't be a coronation. They have to be tested. Boris has to be tested over the course of a 5 or 6 week hustings period, because all sorts of different things can happen. There can be one moment that can turn the whole thing. And I think it would be good for him as well as good for the whole of the Tory party.
I remember when George Bush became president in the USA, David Letterman started his show and said this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened for the opening monologue. And if Boris gets in, I think it's going to be probably the best thing that's ever happened for your radio station.
Well, I said, you're absolutely right on that. I said to somebody the other day who was whinging about, oh my God, won't it be awful if Boris becomes Prime Minister? I said, well, I don't know whether it'll be awful, but from our point of view, it's going to be like catnip, because he is box office.
Never
Whatever
dull.
you think of him, whether you're a Conservative or not, he is going to provide a huge amount of talking points over the next year, and there's nothing wrong with that as far as I'm concerned.
Iain Dale's All Talk. He won't shut up. He's doing 4 and 6 at the Edinburgh Fringe from the 31st of July. Great talking to you, and I'll see you up there.
Cheers, Alex.